The first impressive overpass I can remember seeing was one in Arcata, California, near where I grew up. It's at the terminus of a one-way, two-lane street that gently descends toward its end, passing by a good handful of restaurants and retail in an area of commerce I seem to remember being referred to as Uptown. It's on the west side of Highway 101, opposite Humboldt State University, or as I guess it's now called, Cal Poly Humboldt. They changed the name a year or two ago, I think. This is the street you'd be most likely to take to some extent on your way out of town heading north, getting back onto the freeway from the central part of town, unless you were to jog south a hair and get on the big spiral on-ramp down there. There was a coffee shop, a vegetarian restaurant called the Wildflower Cafe, a small, mysterious, fancy restaurant called Folie Deux. That's French, Folie Deux. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Folie Deux occupied a low, boxy, windowed storefront and might still be there today. The windows held a dark interior, but most of one side was consumed by a tall brick oven, or rather, the backside of a tall brick oven. This oven was noteworthy because it featured a little stone pig's head right square in the center, midway up. I used to watch for this when we'd drive by when I was a kid. I thought it was absurd and funny. Just before Folie Deux was a little freestanding burger place of dark wood called Star's Hamburgers. Then on the other side, a frozen yogurt shop. Next, a bike shop where my dad surprised me with my first new bike. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. It was a Jazz, a brand that was, I think, a subsidiary of Trek. Specifically, it was a Jazz Bold Moves. We walked in there under some pretense or another. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but it was premeditated, and I was pretty well surprised. It was orange with blue branding. It was so awesome, and I loved it. Along with the bike, I got a Jazz 1992 catalog, which I'd occasionally read through, happily arriving on the Bold Moves page, reaffirming in the marketing text just how awesome my bike was, then continuing on and learning more about the other great bikes in the Jazz lineup. The bike shop was called Revolution Cycles, and I went there for some fenders like 10 years ago when I was living back down there in the area for a while. Around the corner and across the street from the bike shop was one of the area's first internet service providers, back around the time that dial-up internet became widespread in the early 90s. I don't think I ever actually set foot in there, but I think it stands out in memory because it was the first ISP that my family subscribed to. $20 a month for Tidepool Internet at tidepool.net, which replaced the America Online subscription we had for a brief while beforehand. The only thing I remember about the walled garden that was AOL is that it had a built-in file repository. I don't remember downloading much, but I did upload one of the first few computer games I created. I think it was called Rock War or something. It involved pushing rocks around and maybe colliding them with one another to pulverize them. Something with rocks or something with war. Probably both. The rocks were uppercase O's, and the player was a smiley face. I wrote it in a primitive and simple programming language called QBasic. The graphics were actually text, arranged in a fixed grid of 40 by 25 characters, filling the computer display at 640 by 350 pixels. The computer could display 256 different symbols in 16 different colors. Each character was numbered. An uppercase letter A is number 65. The smiley face is number 2. A hollow smiley face that's not filled in is number 1. That system of numbering is called the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, or ASCII for short. To be accurate, ASCII itself contains 128 characters, and the 256 characters available in QBasic and other such systems that use the same underlying operating system are furnished by a standard known informally as Extended ASCII, or to be painfully specific, the ISO 88591 standard. I later learned it was possible to use special commands in other programming languages to modify the characters themselves, tampering in the computer's memory to make the letters look different. I even designed my own fonts, but that's another story. To make a trite comparison, AOL was the actual tide pool, and tide pool was the open ocean of the internet. Unlike AOL, you got your own web hosting account with tide pool, a place to upload your own web page if you were one of the dorky few who is savvy and probably bored enough to do so. One way or another, I was enough of both, and I built my first website at tidepool.net/Jacob. The only thing I concretely remember about it was that there was a smoothie recipe page with some really basic smoothies, and I think another page with some QBasic code that I wrote. Pretty sure it had Rock War, plus another game I made called Speedo 2, a game in which you used the computer's arrow keys to change the direction of a fast-moving smiley face, attempting to collect 10 gems while avoiding randomly placed hazards, with the color scheme randomized, and the hazards randomized, and the gems, of course, randomized at each turn, scattered all over the board. Somewhere on an old CD or hard drive or something, I have a copy of speedo2.bas, as the file was called, but not the Tidepool homepage I created, and I don't think Rock War either. The Internet Archive's Wayback Machine doesn't go back that far. It's all disappeared into the digital ether. B Street, or C Street, or H Street, or maybe 5th Street. I guess something in the back of my mind tells me that this main road was H Street, or 5th, one or the other. On the other side of the bike shop lived Redwood Yogurt. I loved the logo, which showed a sturdy-looking soft serve twirled in a cake cone in front of a silhouetted forest backdrop. I think the logo was set in a large sign that was itself made of carved and painted wood. The place had wood paneling inside, the diagonal tongue and groove kind, and served the frozen yogurt in the usual way from a pair of big noisy Taylor machines behind the counter in the back. The wood panels were dark and the vibe was warm. Ever since I can remember, I got a warm and fuzzy feeling from tall trees and the things in which they were depicted, their general aesthetic. Speaking of aesthetic, some years ago, I had an idea that there might be such a thing as aesthetic memory, comprising not so much specific recollections, things, or places, but looking for something else hidden deeper, seeing something else deeper, some broader intangible sensations reflected back at us within the physical and ordinary places which we can recall, those well-treaded places in our minds and our past lives. Vibe memory, maybe you want to call it. The example of this that most stands out in my mind has at its center the light fixtures on the walls of a place down the hill from Uptown, an older building on the corner of the Arcata Plaza called the Jacoby Storehouse. Everything inside seemed to be made of wood that was various shades of gold. The floors creaked. Wainscoting and crown molding and other intricate forms of millwork filled the interior, which consisted of a relatively narrow but deep space, well sectioned off by walls, mostly filled with panes of glass to create small individual retail spaces within. The center of the building's narrow hall opened into a rotunda that was also in turn open to the second story, in which a Christmas tree would be placed during the winter months. The rest of the second story contained mysterious offices for the most part. The beating heart of the place, however, was seen in my eyes through the lights. Wall sconces made of stained glass and wrought iron, depicting a forest in silhouette at sunset, the uneven line of iron redwood shadows supporting a curved pane of hazy wave-streaked orange-hued glass. The light from them was warm, like a sunset's glow itself. Down to these small details that hold this less tangible kind of memory for me, the entire building was in so many ways a testament and monument to the place that came to be known as the Redwood Empire. Taking things purely at face value, as children are so good at doing, I just associated it with glow, with warmth, and some thread of the wild and joyous parts of a childhood where I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time near those trees. Redwood yogurt. Curiously, I don't really remember what the frozen yogurt was like, or at least not to the same level of specific detail with which I can recall an ice cream cone from Thrifty Drug in nearby Valley West, just to the north, which was scooped using a special cylindrical scoop and was about as big as a can of beans, or looked that way to end. Might as well have been as big as my head. Further down the road, past that intersection, the coffee shop that held various names and looked cozy. A house or two or three followed it. On the other side, down from the Wildflower, there was a hole-in-the-wall burrito place called Hey Juan, next to a mini-mart and I think a laundromat or something. I remember thinking Hey Juan had got to be a really cool place where cool people went, because my dad talked about getting burritos from there when he was in college, and it seemed like he was a pretty cool guy back then. Plus, it was open really late. Near the next intersection, the road leveled out. A small motel was tucked away to the right. Tucked away, such that I barely remember ever looking at it. The street side was narrow, and it widened as you went into it. But of course, that was because of what was next to, or in fact above, the hotel, and held your eye as you went beneath it. A long, elevated pedestrian path, arcing up at angles that are steeper than you'd think, high up above, enclosed in a tunnel of diamond interwoven wire fencing, and near it, a diagonal on-ramp, flying over your head from left to right as you approached it. The buttresses of the overpass framed the 2 lanes you'd take to ascend upward from the final intersection of the one-way. You could also veer left into another lane that would lead you under the overpass in a different way, where you'd pop out on another surface street near the Philly cheesesteak. I think that was its name, or maybe the Philly Cheesesteak Company or something. On the far side of the intersection across from the buttress, served by the first part of that left veer, was a little row of businesses with a Subway, a chiropractor, and what I now think was a discreet adult shop of some kind. The 2 main lanes, up and out, felt like a slow-motion launch ramp. Up gently, accelerating, a slight arc and pitch, and the left lane would lead you back down at increasing speed to enter Highway 101 northbound, while the right lane would keep you elevated at an intersection immediately adjacent the border of the university's domain, with the road to your left overpassing the freeway. It's funny now how my mind's eye can't seem to resolve how those various routes and overlaid roads actually intersected one another The thing I remember the most is the way the two lanes climbed back up and out, over and under one another, under the overpasses at speeds increasing, greater than those you'd been moving through town a moment ago. When you're 5 and tired from swinging on the big swings at Redwood Park up the hill, the swings where you pump and get so high you momentarily float, you're flying, quietly ecstatic, when the silhouetted tree line at the park's perimeter looks like the summit of your whole world, and you've flown up next to it, floating. Well, then moving along those ramps in the backseat of a Volkswagen feels like the arc of swinging again, but in slow motion. And it makes you feel safe and happy, and like you know you'll be home soon, as the muffled tones of the motor vroom up and down quietly under you, as your mom rows through the gears, the motion of the clutch engaging and disengaging, creating another arc of ebbing and flowing rhythm in syncopation with the ramps, all resolving themselves in final launch, upward and downward toward 55 miles per hour, coalescing, flattening. The walkway over the overpass and the one-way road below always intrigued me. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I actually walked it and went through it. Not sure when I actually did, but I remember doing it at one point. One of its great mysteries was the tunnel at its end, where it bisected the road alongside the university, a road parallel to the freeway on the walkway's opposite side. A wide, arched concrete tunnel with dim lights within, mysterious from afar. I'd look up from the window, and I'd see people walking on the walkway, wearing backpacks. Safe to presume they were mostly students. The tall tunnel of fencing separating us. It looked so easy to walk like that, so carefree. It felt like a world apart. Somehow, I always knew I would never be one of them. Wouldn't attend classes at my parents' associate degree alma mater. Self-fulfilling prophecy or not, I was right. The church my family attended at the time went through a street outreach phase where a few folks would show up with guitars and sing the Lord on the heathen streets of Arcata. We once set up on the corner near the coffee shop, down at the last intersection across from the subway, and played to the rush hour traffic as it came and went. No traffic light, just stop signs, a transient audience that came and went. It was uncomfortable, but I felt okay knowing that we probably weren't really bothering anyone. The church folks weren't the sign-waving, megaphone-yelling kind who put people's teeth on edge. Just some dudes of various ages playing acoustic and singing the Maranatha songs. At some point during the evening, a neighboring house went to the trouble of bringing out some speakers to their porch, or maybe their upstairs window, from which they cranked Sabbath or something similar. It made me feel awkward and a little bit persecuted. Pretty sure it was just some students having a laugh, but I still think it was kind of a dick move. To be fair, busking for the Lord by someone's kitchen window is kind of a dick move too. Although, I don't think it's actually busking if you're not making any money. Another time, we played on the plaza near the statue of President William McKinley, which was still weird, but felt a little less fraught, because mostly we just had some bums come up to see what was going on and I guess check to see if we were giving out any food. We weren't, but that would have helped the cause, I guess. One time, my mom picked up some hitchhikers who were standing by the left buttress underneath the overpass. It was a woman and her daughter, probably around the same age as my mom and my younger brother, the three of us in my mom's orange VW Super Beetle, and they all climbed in. I think I wasn't any older than 5 or so, and we all fit just fine. We drove north and dropped them off north of McKinleyville on Cornell Road, the exit we'd normally take to get home to our house a mile or so up the hill on Dow's Prairie Road. It was getting later. The sun was glowing low, and I remember worrying about whether they were going to get home safe. Where were they going? Someone was going to pick them up there, I think, but how? Just the two of them and an empty off-ramp, beach on one side, and empty Grinnell Road on the other. A dead end to a ghost town, a literal ghost town. Nothing around really for a few miles except the beach and the endless timberlands and the empty ghost town and the houses up on Dow's Prairie Road where we lived. For being a small college town, the Arcata I knew as a little kid in the late 80s enjoyed freeway infrastructure that, by all appearances, was well engineered and thorough, most of it probably dating to the 50s or thereabouts. Arcing ramps of concrete, overpasses fenced with the same diamond-woven wire as the pedestrian walkway. Someone was thinking ahead in years past and spared little expense. I think there were a total of 4 freeway exits within the relatively short curving section that bisected the town. So in those days, my mom in her beloved little Super Beetle and my dad in his 1984 Subaru GL wagon that was bought new off the lot, and my brother and me in the back seats. Those were good days, swaying over and under the ramps and curves of Eisenhower's roller coasters, held within the inherent order and structure of a system that felt safe, one that made our remote little corner of the world feel central, feel as though it was thoughtfully overseen by wise and caring people who had everything well under control and upon whose work we could always rely.